them in mind, body, and spirit, that becomes a threat to the status quo. That becomes something that the rulers of the land don't want to have happen. So it's in their interest to keep an eye on what people are doing spiritually or religiously. And so that's why, especially in the wake of slave rebellions, you look at the most famous case being the Haitian Revolution under Toussaint Louverture. There's been much scuttlebutt and misstatements, I think, just wrong statements by prominent people like Pat Robertson, the televangelist, who said that the Haitians were being punished by God in the most recent earthquake of 2010 because of a historic pact with the devil that the people made. And what he's referring to is a concealed gathering, a hush harbor moment, Bois Clément rather, wherein the enslaved Haitians under the leadership of Toussaint Louverture, but also local griots and local spiritual leaders actually came together and formed the plan that would eventually spark the Haitian Revolution, the only successful slave revolt in world history, and that established Haiti as the second oldest democracy in the Western Hemisphere and the first free nation of people of African descent globally. When you saw similar attempts, most famously in the form of rebellions by Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser, and ultimately Nat Turner in the early 1800s, there was a crackdown by plantation owners and the larger white society in the South that wanted to break down possibilities for black religion, especially black Christianity, to take hold.
Right, and those rebellions in part were,
or I should say rebellion attempts,
inspired by religion. But the difference, I guess, is that in Haiti, blacks so overwhelmed the white population. And then, of course, you have the issue of the French Revolution that had just taken place.
Yeah.
But in the United States, particularly if we look at what happened with Nat Turner, because his actually took place as opposed to
the failed attempts by
Gabriel Prosser or Denmark Vesey.
Or even before that, Stono Rebellion of 1740, 1740.
Right.
Yeah.
But with Nat Turner, who was clearly inspired by his faith, and was not a lunatic. I mean, was in keeping with the beliefs of the time period. The backlash was gruesome, right, for him. Whereas when you look at places in the Caribbean and even South America where black people are in the majority, there seems to be more, I don't know if this is true or not, but it appears that there has to be more negotiation, even when there is disruption, or when black people rebel, or when black people want to express their religious beliefs. Whites would have to be a little bit more accommodating because they're so outnumbered. Is that
well,
not?
I think the point has to be nuanced a little bit. First, to think about the issue of the consequences of the Nat Turner Rebellion in the U.S. And well, let me start this way. I'll start with first things first. The Haitian Revolution and why it was so important, so inspiring, and also so feared in various corners of the world. To be inspired by their faith and by their movement, even though they had sizable numbers, right? Toussaint Louverture and many of his followers and fellow leaders. You know, you think about Henri Christophe, you think about Jean-Jacques Dessalines, right? They didn't know how successful this uprising was going to be. They didn't know how long it was going to be because it lasted ultimately a decade, right? Yes, they were inspired by the French Revolution and many of the proclamations of equality and fraternity and, you know, justice and all this kind of stuff. But enslaved African Americans were also made great promises and greatly inspired by the rhetoric of the American Revolution, right? So it's not just about having a source of influence or inspiration to work off of, either spiritually or in secular terms, right? The Bible or the Constitution or Declaration of Independence or the Declaration of the Rights of Man. It ultimately, and this is why a spiritual faith was so important in so many of these uprisings, is that the ability for Toussaint Louverture to not only help galvanize and lead the Haitian rebels against not only the French, because, you know, we can take that for granted. The French wanted to keep control of the island, you know, especially under the leadership of Napoleon. But then ultimately they're fighting off the Spanish, they're fighting off the British empires, right? So they're fighting off 3 empires, plus the United States is waiting and to find out if they can get in the game, right? Under the presidency of, interestingly enough, a slave owner by the name of Thomas Jefferson, who is very fearful that if what happens in Haiti were to spread throughout the American South, what would happen to this nation? So we can't, even nowadays when we talk about issues of globalization and things like that, those kind of forces or issues have always been in place, right? You know, Americans, you know, 200 years ago were mindful and aware of what was happening on the island of Haiti, even without, you know, cable news or satellite feeds or other kinds of internet information. What's also important about that example is that even having stood up against all these global forces, you know, the combined militaries of 3 world empires, and beating them, successfully winning them against them, and gaining their rightful independence, I would agree with folks like Randall Robinson in his book, Unbroken Agony, where you see the fact that Haiti's been suffering for 200 years because of their audacity to want to be free and to actually win victory against the forces of European imperialism. So then that's why they've had levels of poverty that are unimaginable in the 21st century. That's why international institutions such as the IMF, the World Bank, the United Nations, and others have been very slow, even before any natural disaster, to actually respond to the needs of greater economic development in that nation.
But they also, now, and I don't know the causes or the implications of it, but I do know that the U.S. did occupy Haiti.
Oh yeah, at various points.
And that part of our occupation involved the religious persecution.
Okay. I mean, and to clarify that, yes, throughout much of the 20th century, you know, talking about the use of military force and things